Many Zimbabweans have known no leader other than him. But now Robert Mugabe clings to power, even as his opponents claim victory in the presidential vote. Is this the beginning of a new political era in Zimbabwe? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garda. It's been days since voters in Zimbabwe went to the polls to vote for their president, and the results are still out. According to the Electoral Commission, President Robert Mugabe's ruling party has lost its majority in parliament, and the opposition is claiming it's won the presidential post with just over 50% of the vote. It's basing that announcement on its own tallies, but only the government can make official the election results. And fears remain that if the stalemate isn't resolved soon, the country could face a crisis. While speaking to Al Jazeera earlier, the government protested the opposition's victory declaration.
Well, that they're trying to rig the elections. You notice it's calibrated in such a way that I know they just get over the half that's required, and you can see that they are anxious for a result which is not theirs.
Well, for almost 3 decades, Zimbabweans have known no leader other than Robert Mugabe. But that might soon change. The 84-year-old leader is seeking his 6th term in office. Mugabe has been under fierce criticism from Western countries for his alleged crackdown on his opponents. And in 2000, he ordered the takeover of white-owned farms in Zimbabwe. Mugabe's longtime rival is this man, Morgan Tsvangirai. He's the leader of the Movement for Democratic Change, which he founded in 1999. Tsvangirai has challenged Mugabe for the presidential post twice. Mugabe has dismissed him as a puppet of what he calls Western imperialism. And then there's Simba Makoni. He was a finance minister under Mugabe, but recently broke off ties in order to challenge him. Makoni was knocked out in the first round of voting, but he'd play a key role in any runoff election, as he earlier indicated that he would back Tsvangirai. Well, joining our discussion today are our guests. In Harare, Christopher Mutsvangwa, ZANU PF spokesperson and former Zimbabwean ambassador to China. In London, HEBSON MAKUVISE, Movement for Democratic Change, MDC chief representative in the UK and Europe. And also in London, CHAKAODZA, an African affairs analyst and an expert in constitutional law. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Mutsvangwa in Harare, the ZANU PF has lost the parliamentary majority. Would you concede that in the presidential race, Morgan Tsvangirai is in an unassailable lead?
No. He is not at all in an unassailable lead. We are waiting for the official results from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. This is the properly constituted body which should announce what is the outcome. We just can't have every party and every individual in an election like this announcing whatever he feels like. But in any event, it's clear that Morgan Tsvangirai's claims to be the victor, an absolute victor in the presidential elections, are at best premature, and at most they are off the mark.
HEBSON MAKUVISE, premature, off the mark. Where's the evidence that indicates that Tsvangirai is in a clear lead?
Well, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission had results from every polling station around Zimbabwe displayed outside the polling stations. And it's simply a matter of gathering the evidence. That's the evidence. You simply collect the figures, add them up, and that's the evidence. So, according to the evidence that we have gathered from all the polling stations, our president, Morgan Tsvangirai, has won the election.
Mr. MAKUVISE, do you think that this moment, this election, has been the most pivotal moment and event in Zimbabwean history since 1980, when Zimbabwe freed itself from colonialism?
This is the most important event that has happened in Zimbabwe. When you look at the inflation rate of 100,000%, when you look at the economy of Zimbabwe, of the country, there's no economy to talk about. When you look at the hospitals, there is no medicine, there's no equipment, there's no staff. Children, boarding schools cannot accommodate their students because there's no running water. University of Zimbabwe, they are struggling to cope up in terms of accommodating their students. It's everywhere. There's no jobs. 80% unemployment. It's a record.
In London as well, Austin CHAKAODZA. Now, the last time in 2002, early opinion polls had said that Morgan Tsvangirai had won 70% of the vote. We know Robert Mugabe eventually won that presidential vote and was only strengthened in 2002. So would you say that it's very early and that the MDC shouldn't be counting its chickens?
Yes, indeed. It's highly speculative. And in fact, the political situation in Zimbabwe is more complicated than we are made to understand. First of all, in terms of the parliamentary elections, neither the ZANU PF party nor the MDC led by Tsvangirai is going to have a majority of seats in the future parliament. So really, the situation is more complicated. And therefore, the smaller MDC party led by Arthur Mtambara is going to play the role of honest broker. And any future president of Zimbabwe is going to take that into account, since it is going to be a hung parliament.
Mr. CHAKAODZA, I've got an interesting article that you wrote about a month ago. You said that most of the candidates in this election, and I'm assuming you mean both presidential and parliamentary, are, quote, a bunch of fair weather, Johnny-come-lately microwave politicians. That's not a very optimistic look at those running, is it? What did you mean by that?
I was referring to some of the candidates standing in the elections. As you are going to establish in the final analysis, some of them are highly inexperienced, and therefore the future parliament of Zimbabwe is going to be quite interesting indeed.
Christopher Mutsvangwa in Harare, as we speak, are members and advisors from both the MDC and ZANU PF meeting?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to comment on the remarks which have just been made by the MDC guy. This, they are part of the Western hangout in Zimbabwe. They invited Western sanctions. Obviously, the Western countries, especially the former imperial power, Britain and its Anglo-Saxon allies, they wanted to punish Zimbabwe for taking back the land. And what has come about is that we have an election which has been run under very difficult conditions, because the Western countries wanted to create conditions of immiseration of the people of Zimbabwe. And what the MDC has been riding on is a misery index vote on the part of the people of Zimbabwe, to introduce war and hardship to the people of Zimbabwe. They want to be gods in Zimbabwe, deciding who is wrong, who is right, and punishing accordingly, using their power and the privilege of historical economic relationship with Zimbabwe. And that's what the MDC has been riding on. And, it's said that they want to blame the victim, instead of blaming the arsonist. This is, it's like you have got a child who is left to guard a house, and an arsonist comes, and you, the father, you start beating up the child instead of dealing with the arsonist. This is strange logic on the part of the MDC. Okay,
now we've heard the accusations. Now, to answer my question, are you meeting with them?
No. We are not meeting with them. We are waiting for the outcome of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. The result has to be officially announced. We are almost through with the legislative elections. We have done the parliamentary ones, the lower house, and we almost neck and neck with the MDC. There's a few votes on the part of the other splinter of the MDC, which is implacably opposed, obviously, to their former colleagues. We are sure that we are going to carry the Senate majority, which is the other part of the parliamentary elections. And on the presidential, it's clear that the constitutional provisions calls for a majority of 51% amongst the four candidates. And among the four candidates right now, there is none who is going to carry that absolute majority, which clears the way under the Constitution for a run-up among the two top ones, and that's what we are looking for. We just want to meet the provisions of the Constitution, and when that we have done, then the whole electoral process can be concluded. Then from there we take on the job of proceeding to the next You know, we are not meeting with definitely we are not meeting with the Tsvangirai faction, and we are not meeting with anybody as yet.
All right, gentlemen, don't go away. There's much more to come on Inside Story. When we come back, we discuss the likely scenarios in Zimbabwe after the vote. Do stay with us.